Okay, welcome everyone to this dialogue den. I'd like to introduce Dave Minnelli. He's the Senior Director, Event Analytics at Merit Events. His team, their job is to transfer data into insights, and today he's going to be talking to us about how data can pave the way to the next new normal. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Sonia, and welcome everybody. I hope you can see my screen. I'm getting ready to share. It's been a very educational, entertaining day. I hope you all have enjoyed it. So, can you see my screen okay? You see the presentation, Sonia?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today. Let's talk a little bit about travel incentives and ultimately what we're seeing from the data side, both internally and externally. Just to introduce myself, and Sonia, thank you for that introduction. I work for Merit's Global Events. I am Senior Director over our event analytics team. We are a full service event management company. And around this wheel of services that we deliver, we collect data. We collect data around all kinds of different events, incentive travel being one of those events, but we do thousands of events per year, pre-COVID, of course. And ultimately, my role and my team's role is to make sense of that data, be it budget information that we can drive benchmarking data or behavioral data from our guest information. So that's our goal. We transform that data, and ultimately is really about driving insights that help us design better events and drive results. So what we're going to talk about today are three things. First of all is let's talk about what are people doing today in terms of during COVID as alternatives to keep your incentive trip qualifiers engaged and motivated. And then we're also going to talk about what are we seeing out into the future in terms of what are planners saying, when are they planning, where are they planning, and what are they planning to do with their group incentive travel programs after this pandemic, or even as this pandemic wanes. And ultimately that will give us a glimpse of what does the next normal look like. And if you have any questions during this session, please feel free to use the chat box, and I'll attempt to answer those at the end of this conversation. I do appreciate those of you that were able to fill out our survey. We did send out a survey to our Site Canada folks. And then we also talked with our Merit's Global Events team as well, just to get a feel for what are the alternatives that have been offered in lieu of the incentive group travel programs during COVID. And ultimately, I think the key is that keeping those individual trip qualifiers engaged and motivated during this time is really key. So making sure that they have some opportunity to travel at some point, whether it be that a postponement, most everybody's postponing their event to a later date. Some are canceling their trip entirely, but ultimately many are, if they are canceling that trip, they are allowing those guests to attend a future event. And that's key from a travel standpoint. Some are even moving to individual trips, and many are using cash or points or gift cards, merchandise as opportunities as an alternative, at least in the short term, while we can't travel. Welcome everyone. I see a few are additional or just joining us. We're going to continue on to talk about what does the future look like from an incentive standpoint? What's the data telling us? So there are several external studies that we're also looking at. So recently, you've probably seen that the Site Foundation, in conjunction with Incentive Research Foundation and FICP, have put an industry survey of incentive travel out there. There was a sneak peek about a week and a half ago. And one of the things I thought was very interesting is that when they asked specifically about the views of executives towards resuming incentive travel programs, the good thing is that companies are still committed to those travel programs, though there is a high belief that fundamental changes are necessary. So you look at this in the blue, 79% believe that we need to continue these events. 21% did say that we need to re-justify incentive travel programs, but ultimately 79% are committed. And almost a majority of individuals believe, though, that there is some changes that need to occur. Most of those changes are in the reducing the safety risks that are associated with those events. Some very small, which is good to hear, a very small amount believe that they need to change to reduce costs. So I'm based in the United States. I'm in St. Louis. So I'll talk a little bit about the American sentiment that's happening right now as a proxy for some of the studies that we're seeing as well. This is a travel barometer from a company called MMGY that's going out to thousands of American travelers or potential travelers to get a feel in terms of how do they feel about the safety aspect of certain travel elements. And we that survey went out actually monthly, but I wanted us to look at May, July, and September, because you can see that the trends are moving in the right direction. People still are not necessarily feeling safe to travel, but the trends are in the right direction. You know, domestic travel and transportation and even lodging are now hitting on the safe side of the curve. We are seeing, obviously, international travel and cruises, still some concerns in that area. But then think about what we do, which is really around event planning. You know, if you look at offsite business meetings, which are going to tend to be smaller, most of your incentive programs are going to tend to fall in this realm. And then conferences or conventions are going to tend to be much bigger. You know, the comfort level is less for those bigger events and higher for smaller events, but ultimately we're hoping to see that these trends continue and that people feel more comfortable and confident traveling again. And we're excited to see those trends. Now, we are still a far ways off, however, from folks feeling comfortable at a group event. This is a PCMA survey, their event Compass. As of October, they surveyed participants once again, May, July, September were three three time frames that I chose. And the question is really around how likely are you to participate in the absence of a vaccine or herd immunity? And I think this just goes to show us that people are still relatively uncomfortable. A third did say that they are likely or highly likely to go to an event if it's local. But only about a sixth of the population said if it's a longer distance or if it's global, specifically internationally. So we do have a ways to go. And we know that a vaccine or some measurement of herd immunity is going to help move these numbers in the right direction to get us back to traveling again to events. If we look at the short-term outlook for incentives, this is also the PCMA Business Events Compass. And as of October, what they're showing is that general business meetings in the Western Hemisphere are viewed more positively at this point in time in terms of more confidence in attending and holding those events. Right now, unfortunately, the incentive side is being seen here less positively in Europe, Middle East, Africa, US, Canada, and then even worse on the Latin America side. However, this is improving. Once again, where we were in May versus where we are in October, we're continuing to see these bubbles get closer and closer to a great outlook. So that's where we are currently. I also looked at another index out there, which is the iMeet Planner Index. And this is recent survey results from just a couple of weeks ago. They did not provide 2022 as an option or beyond. They were just asking, when do you expect face-to-face events to return? And a majority, just a couple weeks ago, a majority were saying we believe that they're going to return by the end of the second quarter of 2021. As you get into the lighter pink, as you move into later into 2021, and still 12%, we're not sure. Well, and those of you that responded to the Site Canada survey last week are a little less confident currently about the first and second quarter of 2021. Actually, nobody said events are happening at the beginning or at the end of this year, which 15% of the IMEET survey were talking about face-to-face events happening. But your next incentive group is planned in the really in the first and second quarter time frame is 38%. And then another, my math's correct here, another 34% is the third quarter of 2020 and beyond. But we still have quite a few that are not sure about when the next event is going to happen. So when we look at destinations, our attendees are seeing that places in the North America outside the United States are stronger for incentives, as well as Europe. Now, those of you who are aware, down here south of the border, we're having an election in a few days, 6 days to be exact. A little crazy around here. Lots of silliness going on in the country. So I'm not surprised you don't want to travel here currently, but we want to have you, and we want you to come back to the United States. So hopefully we get through the next month or so, things start to turn around, especially with COVID. Some of our restrictions start to relax. We're hoping to see more travel back in the United States, but it is good to see lots of local travel in Canada, in Europe, as well as Mexico, Caribbean, and even the Central America destinations back on the radar. We still have quite a few that aren't sure where their next incentive travel program is planned, but hopefully the planners are going to be gaining some additional confidence soon. So then we looked at what changes are planned moving forward. So if you think about the types of changes that are going to be critical, and once again, this was the Mayor's Global Events team in terms of interviewing our client base, as well as our Site Canada event attendees in red. And what you'll see is safety is key. Safety protocols. Over half of everybody said safety protocols such as social distancing, temperature screening, food and beverage service in terms of food and beverage stations where it's not necessarily the buffet line, things of that nature are really going to be critical. The types of protocols that people want: deep cleaning of rooms, deep cleaning of event space, outdoor event space. Those are really critical elements that we see future incentive travel programs having moving forward. And I think those are to stay for a while. Now, what's interesting is the bubble concept. The sports teams, like the National Hockey League, did a fantastic job of keeping the hockey players in a bubble and staying in a location. It's not as popular with incentives, and I think the reasoning behind that is because people that go to a face-to-face event that ultimately qualify for that event, they want the experience and they want that destination experience. And if you're on property and all you are going to be is on property for several days, that could be a struggle. So it's not too surprising that the bubble concept is not as popular. So then the other really key thing that planners are planning is close-in travel. not surprising as well, given all the rules and restrictions and regulations per country, per municipality, that most or almost half of individuals say that they would rather stay in country for their next incentive travel programs. A small group saying that drivable destinations, people are, as we saw on an earlier slide, people are feeling more confident in air travel. So that's good to see. But ultimately, staying in country, I think, is something that's going to be here to stay for a little while, and that close-in destinations are going to be key. I don't see that as a long-term trend, but I do think, at least in the short term, while we get through this pandemic. So then ultimately, we're also looking at smaller groups. So that could be the same destination, but multiple waves of trip attendees. It could be in the realm of multiple trip choices. So giving your qualifiers the opportunity to travel to 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different destinations, and they can choose. One may be more motivating to them than another. And then finally, individualized trips, where I'm not necessarily traveling as a group, but maybe I'm traveling with a spouse or partner or family on that trip, is also not quite as popular, but still there are some of our events, both with our population, Merritt's Global Events, as well as with the site survey, where that is an option. And then these other areas, it's good to see that reduced budget is not an issue. One of the concerns that we had at the beginning of this event is this going to push us into a global recession? Are companies going to not have as much money to spend? And I think what we're seeing right now is that's not necessarily the case. I think that there are going to be some industries that are hit harder than others, but it's good to know that less than, or 1 in 10, only 1 in 10 are considering reducing their budget. The other good thing that I think the alternative to travel that we saw with points, merchandise, or cash really should have been a short-term option, because there's nothing that replaces that face-to-face experience. And in some cases, a few will continue to offer that maybe as an alternative, especially for those individuals that may not feel comfortable yet traveling. It is going to take some people a while before they feel comfortable traveling, and others are ready to go. I'm ready to go, and I hope most of you are as well. And then this was even more encouraging, the fact that 26% of the Merritt's population said, I don't plan any changes after COVID. I mean, we want to do what we've done in the past. So good to see those. Not incredibly surprising, but ultimately I do think that the safety protocols are going to be longer term versus the close in and smaller groups. The other question is digital. Does digital play a role in the incentive experience? And for the most part, the answer between the Merritt's Global Events and the site survey team is no. It doesn't replace the events, and may not even replace pieces of the incentive event. However, there are components that may be considered part of a hybrid event for an incentive experience. The recognition event, for instance, or an award ceremony potentially could be live streamed. Those are some components. The social gathering piece, that's hard to do. Did a good job today with the chef as a opportunity to gather as a group, but obviously it's hard to communicate with multiple people across a Zoom call as well. And then some of the meetings component as well are some of our incentives have a couple hours worth of business meetings that are associated with it. Those are things that potentially could also be digitized. So in conclusion, based on what we're seeing is, we truly believe that companies, as we've seen, they fundamentally believe how important group incentive travel programs are to individual behavior, motivating that behavior, and ultimately driving results for that business. Continuing to drive the motivation of those trip qualifiers or those potential trip qualifiers with some sort of motivating alternatives, at least in the short term, is critical. Be that cash merchandise points, gift cards, be it the opportunity to attend a future event, is going to be critical until we get through our current pandemic. And as I mentioned before, looking forward in the short term, as things wane, as restrictions start to wane as well, the really key components that we see that are going to enable incentive travel programs to come back sometime middle of 2021 are really the safety protocols, the smaller group size, as well as those localized experiences. And lastly, as I mentioned before, digital, it's not a replacement for the incentive experience. It's just an enhancement. And ultimately, if it enables additional people to attend that event that may not feel comfortable, at least portions of that event, it's certainly an opportunity for hybrid, but it will never replace the true feel of traveling to a destination as an incentive trip qualifier. That is all I have today. I'd like to open, if there's any questions in the chat, feel free. Ask any questions. Sonia, happy to answer any questions. Certainly reach out to me as well. I've provided my email address as well as my LinkedIn address here. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to share this presentation after the fact today. Thank you very much for your time. Oh, sorry.
If anybody wants to jump on and ask a question, we do have a couple of minutes before we're going back to the main plenary. So you can turn on your mic and your video. We have some time and you can address Dave with any questions that you might have. Do you see one there in the chat, Dave? How do you see virtual enhancing an incentive program? And he's looking for examples. That's from Jan.
Jan, thank you for the question. A couple of ways. If there is a recognition event, so in the event that, like for instance, historically it might have been some sort of an award ceremony or some sort of a dinner event where people are being called up to the stage and being congratulated for their service. I mean, that is something that absolutely can be digitized, can be broadcast to a larger audience. It doesn't have to necessarily take place on site at that event, or it could take place on site at that event and just be simultaneous. If there is a business meeting component, so some events may have an hour or two of a business content. That is also something that can be live streamed, broadcast. That's another area. Those are really kind of the two main areas that I see based on our findings that lend themselves to digital experience. But, I don't necessarily see that, as you go on the event and you experience the activities and at the destination, that's going to be much, much harder to live stream and get that same experience as being there live. Thank you for the question.
Excellent. If there's no more questions, we can, I want to first thank you very much, Dave, for taking the time to create this presentation for us. You really went in depth. You made some survey questions in advance so that you could give us some really good accurate numbers. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much.